Hi, everyone. I'm Deborah Kahn, founder of Being Patient. And part of our initiative is we're trying to bring practical advice to you all, people impacted by dementia. So today we thought we would conquer how one can make modifications in their home in order to accommodate dementia. So joining me is Grant Warner. He is a design consultant who deals specifically advising care facilities on how important design is in the care for dementia patients. Thanks so much for joining us, Grant.
Thanks for having me.
So let's just start first obviously, we're talking about a later phase of dementia. If we're talking about a care facility, when someone's diagnosed with dementia, they can live normally for years. But there comes a time where you have to consider the environment and making specific modifications in order to accommodate for the progression of the disease. Just give us a little bit of an overview of what people should be thinking about and really at what time.
Well, in a single family home environment, the most critical location, the most critical room from a life safety standpoint to protect your loved one is the kitchen. And so there are lots of things we can do to make kitchens safer. Sometimes folks suffering from dementia may leave a stove on for hours at a time. It can burn something. It can fill the house with smoke. It can obviously start fires. So from a life safety standpoint, there's technologies out there. Appliances themselves are getting smarter. Some of them have smart technology, smart functions that will sense that a stove has been, let's take a stove for example, has been left on, and will turn itself off. There are other products like Guardian makes what they call a Guardian fire suppression system, a Guardian 3. It's the model number is 300B, where you can put it into the cabinet above the microwave or a cabinet above a stove, and it has its own isolated single purpose fire suppression system that can also sense the same problem for an older stove if you don't have the funds to replace a range with a smart appliance. And that device will sit there and wait and can sense if there's a grease fire or something like that maybe is left from a stove being left on too long. Another one although it's not a fire suppression system, there is one that can alert you or alert first responders. It's called Fire Avert, and that's another one that can be retrofitted. And they have models that can accommodate both electric stoves and gas stoves. And then there are other models of products that can just simply turn the power off on a stove if you need something very basic. And sometimes people put those in if they know that they have a loved one that's particularly dangerous with stoves or keeps trying to cook when they can't anymore. You can have it's a master power throw switch that you can actually hide, or you can secure with a key, or you can put in a drawer to basically just cut the power off from that appliance. There's
So
other things like shelving. If you can move things down in shelves so so the resident or that your loved one is not so tempted to try to reach or climb up on a chair or climb up on a counter, just pull things down and make things easier to reach for them. And like my wife does, she puts my tostada chips in bags labeled kale, so I don't even pay attention to what's on the top shelf. And there are cabinet locks that you can put on. Some of them are even just magnetic. They're little magnetic hasps that you put on the inside of the lock. And with a simple magnet, you on the outside can lift that hasp from the outside without having to have a specialized key. But it can discourage someone who's maybe rummaging through shelves or rummaging through cabinets.
we talked about earlier that you consult mainly for care facilities with people with dementia. So obviously, in those circumstances, they're not really using the kitchen. So what is it that you have to keep in mind in terms of design to make a better environment for somebody with dementia?
We do put kitchens in there for activities. They can be for residents to participate under supervision with in the participation in making the meals, maybe even cooking their favorite recipes. So we want that stimulation. So the small households we design, even in larger communities, do have residential kitchens within them, and that's where we've learned about a lot of these safety devices, specifically these that can be put into single family homes instead of the big expensive commercial systems. But we try whenever we can to break larger communities down into smaller family-like groupings so that it's not as overwhelming. There's not 100 people in the dining room. There may be 10 or 12 or 16 possibly at the most. and to make those households flexible so that as the residents' needs change over time or their stages progress through their whatever dementia it is that they may be suffering for, those households are flexible. So they can either be reassigned for populations for the one room schoolhouse type care model, for example, or a peer to peer care model, or both, depending on what's best for that resident population. So small scale, family size spaces, residential feel, residential finishes, residential lighting, lots of daylight. And then we also try in those environments to make sure there's no dead ends, that everything at least is a contiguous loop so that we don't have anyone panic if they get stuck in a dead end.
See, I had heard that before. It's like rounded, circular environments are really good. And presumably, I guess that's just for the pacing, like if going around and around, right, instead of coming to an end and not knowing which way to turn.
That's right.
But I mean, those are pretty serious modifications. But I guess if you're building a care facility, that would work. In a home, sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't, I suppose.
That's right. In a home, there's simple things we can do, like in terms of color choices, for example, providing more contrast for a resident so they can see the toilet against the floor in contrast instead of a monochrome, because right now monochrome's in gray on gray on gray. That's not good for dementia. We want contrast between the toilet and the floor so they can see where it is, especially if they're having depth perception issues. They can see that we want color contrast between the toilet and the wall behind it. We want color contrast between grab bars. If you put grab bars in your home for your loved one and the wall so they can see where to grasp it. And then contrast in things like the vanity and the sink and the floor as well. And there are things we can do in the bathroom too to improve safety, like add shades, pull down shades over mirrors if a resident or a loved one maybe sees their own reflection, but instead of seeing themselves, sees a stranger, we can hide those mirrors without having to take them off the wall.
So tell me a little bit about the lighting. You talked about daylight and, maybe contrast. What is it about the lighting that is so important?
One of the most important things is to make sure that the person suffering from dementia can maintain their circadian rhythms. One of the things you've probably noticed as people start to suffer from these types of diseases is they may lose that ability to get quality sleep, REM sleep, at night, and then become more dependent, unfortunately, on medication. Medication aids to sleep, which is bad for their systems and things like that long term. So we want to, with the daylight, keep that connection to the outside to help them see the transitions, hopefully gently, so we don't go through sundowning syndromes where there's a radical transformation between day and night. We want them to see that transition change. And then also there are lighting fixtures and lighting systems out there now that help ease those transitions and help reinforce their circadian rhythms.
So, in terms of, I think one of the things that you also do is install monitoring systems. Is that right?
Sometimes there's a lot of controversy around those from a privacy standpoint. So some of them are passive. Those are usually much more acceptable, especially to family members. But then there are some that are a lot more active. So some people think they're intrusive. Some people, in some conditions, it may be necessary. So there's a lot of controversy around those monitoring systems. But there are a lot of them out there, and they do all kinds of things.
So, at what point do you think home modification? I mean, we have a Stephen Barbieri, who's a member of our community and often appears on Being Patient. He said he's not allowed to use a stove when he's home alone, only allowed to use the microwave because it turns off, and he finds his lunch in the microwave sometimes later because he forgot he forgot that he had to reheat it again, right? And so a common cause. So I have to admit, Steve, I like myself without dementia, I have made the same mistake as well. So here is someone who is not very far along, but there is in terms of the progression of the disease, but needs a reminder. To remind him sometimes of what he's forgetting in the kitchen, right? So what do you usually recommend in terms of, I mean, I know you deal more with care facilities, but when should people start thinking about these things in the home?
It's really difficult to say. I personally have not gone through the difficulty of caring for someone with dementia. I've only really observed it in a larger setting and had a secondary role helping others. So I don't have any personal experience with it. I don't know when is the best time, but there are resources out there. There are people that can help you make that decision and help folks with those resources. One of them is Oasis, www.oasisnet.org. They have a lot of outreach classes. They have a lot of resources and checklists, and they have support groups and things like that for people that are caring for folks that have dementia. And they would probably have a lot more insight into when these things need to be considered. Another is OHI, Oklahoma Healthy Aging Initiative. They're based in Tulsa. They're an offshoot. They're an affiliated organization with OU, University of Oklahoma. They have a lot of resources and classes and things like that. And hopefully for all of your listeners, there are resources like that in their communities. Those are just a few that happen to be in some cities. I hope that those resources are available to everyone or in every city, or hopefully someday will be available in every city. I hope that maybe they could give you a better answer than I could, because I don't know when to make some of these adjustments. I deal with life safety, hard construction environments and things like that. So I think in terms of renovation and what systems can be added, what safety features can be added, but I don't know the timing
So what are
related
the
to
top, I
progressions.
mean, you mentioned the kitchen, obviously, because that's
Mhm.
one that could cause a lot of problems, but where are the top main areas people should consider for safety?
Kitchens and bathrooms.
Kitchens and
Bathrooms are one of those are probably the highest rates of incidents and injuries, and unfortunately deaths in homes, are in kitchens and bathrooms.
But presumably the bathroom is because of falling, right? It's the safety.
Falling.
So that's not necessarily
Just
even dementia. That's just old age in some cases, right?
It can be, it can also be burns. So we want to make sure that you check your faucets, especially shower faucets and things like that, to make sure they're equipped with scald protection. A lot of newer faucets that come on the market these days pretty much come with it, but in an older home with an older faucet, it may not have that scald protection. So if you can imagine someone who maybe has lost the sense of feel along their skin, may not realize the water's too hot, or have slipped and fallen or moved to a wall and hit the faucet and turned it all the way to the hot water. The scald protection will prevent hot water from surging out of the fixture and burning someone. And so that's something you could very easily check with your faucets, whether that be your kitchen faucet or your shower faucet or your vanity faucets.
Yeah, and Steve is also bringing up that Alexis timers help. We've heard this from quite a few people about Alexis being the reminder to
Mm.
set and remind you to do something, like whether it's appliances or what have you.
And
Another
there's some great apps out there that are being developed for Alexa, if they're not already available, that help someone suffering from dementia remember what day it is, remember if it's the morning or afternoon, remember what season it is. This is the fall, and most importantly, remember holidays and loved ones' birthdays, grandchildren's birthdays, and things like that. There's some really neat apps out there that I've seen. I don't know how many are available yet, or if they work on the Alexa platform yet. I'd like to look into that a little bit more. But those are always very helpful, just to have that voice, have that reminder. And some of these apps and some of these devices now can be recorded in their own loved ones' voices, their own daughter's voices or grandchildren's voices.
We're just getting a comment as you're saying this, from Stacy Davis Jones, who's saying, oh, and Alexa Alexa's amazing. Thankfully, we got one in the middle of the pandemic. So when I got COVID, I was still able to talk to her and see her. It was for sure so calming to know, right? So even just to remain in contact with the person. She also says that dementia clocks helped her mom, and her constant naps and monitoring system has been really helpful as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
when I mentioned the monitoring systems being controversial for private homes, when loved ones are making those decisions, that's not controversial. It's when we are making those decisions in larger format environments where we want to make sure the families are included and either approve or not approve the use of those kinds of devices. But
Yeah.
in your private home, it's up to you. You can do whatever you'd like to do, obviously. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So, have you, once you install, once you plan the design for the care facility, what types of feedback are you getting in terms of, how helpful and in what way it is to the people, the residents?
We are constantly checking in on how things go. We even do sleepovers in our communities where we stay and pretend to be residents for 24 hours and try to at least somewhat emulate and see what the experience is really like, and hopefully then learn from that and see if anything can be changed immediately or if it needs to be applied to the next project. So we're constantly checking in to see. We get all kinds of feedback. It all comes back to the care model. There's over 100 different types of dementia out there. And so we can't design every community to accommodate every dementia and every stage of those dementias. As you know, there's 6 cognitive levels, and so we're designing at least for 4, trying to at least design for 4 of them. But what we do try to do is provide flexibility so that the care partners, the ones that are there and spending times with the loved ones, the ones who know the family members come in and work on the care plans with their care partners and with the nurses, can adapt that household to whatever those specific needs are for that individual population. And it's easier when we keep them in smaller groups. It'd be harder to adapt a community for 100 people, but if it's just 10 or 12, it's easier to kind of shuffle and get people together if they need to be in the same type of environment. Or if it's a peer-to-peer model where they help each other because they're at different stages of the cognitive levels of perceptions.
So what does that look like with design if in the peer-to-peer model?
In the peer-to-peer, we want to make sure that we can turn certain systems on and off, like those monitoring systems, for example. We may equip all the households. Let's take CC Young, for example, is a community here in Dallas that they had just built a building called the Vista. It's 10 stories tall, and it has 2 small households per floor stacked up. Because it's a small site, they had to go up. They couldn't go out. And so those pairs of households now are all fully equipped to do everything and anything that's necessary for any level of dementia using the peer-to-peer model. But the systems that are not necessary for certain types of folks maybe in stage 3 or stage 2 don't need or don't want, can be turned off or deactivated. Same thing with egress. Certain things are locked down. They can deactivate that and open things back up. They can lock down the connections between the 2 households on the floor, or they can open them up. So they have a lot of the systems already built in. It's just a matter then of plugging and playing and mixing and matching based on what the staff see and what the loved ones of those family members come in and give them feedback about.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I was wondering about is, hallucinations are often a part of dementia, whether you have Alzheimer's or a different type of dementia, Lewy body. Is there anything to keep in mind in terms of keeping people safe when they're having hallucinations?
I don't know the answer to that. I would defer to some of those care partners who actually have to deal with it. I can't even imagine how difficult.
Design, like, is familiarity, or I don't know.
Oh yes, familiarity is always helpful. That's why some of our communities may look retro, but that's on purpose because they're connecting with those longer term memories of what they remember environments or diners or cafes to be like in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And of course that shifts as the aging population shifts decade after decade. So you're absolutely right. We want it to be familiar.
It would appear
Very calm, not a lot of busy patterns, not a lot of paisley, of course, with high contrast. We want to keep it very natural, very soft, low contrast. We don't want big transitions because if someone's panicking and literally running away from a care partner, they may perceive a dark spot in the floor or a transition between 2 types of floors as a hole or a step, and they may fall even though it's flush because they're anticipating it stepping down, or they may avoid it altogether because they see it as a hole in the floor. We avoid highly reflective finishes like mirrors because those can cause panic from some people if they're suddenly surprised by a mirror next to them where it's a reflection of themselves, but they see a stranger because they're looking for themselves at the age of 40 or 50, not themselves at the age of 80 or 90, and they don't recognize themselves. And then the other thing we do to try to minimize panic and behaviors like that is we try to make staff support spaces as hidden as possible, as discreet as possible, like Disney, with the tunnels hidden underneath Disney World for all the staff to move and come and go, for laundry to move around, for food services to come around, for trash to come and go. We try to do that in memory support environments too, to keep those disruptions, vendors coming in, AT&T coming in, people we don't know, people the residents don't know, from coming into the household itself, to minimize those disruptions. So a lot of those services are on the outside of the building, or they're hidden in corridors, back of house corridors and things like that. And most importantly, secured, because as you know, there are those out there that will prey on folks suffering from dementia. So we want to make sure we maximize that security for them as well.
Yeah. Well, that's some great advice. Thanks so much, Grant, for sharing it with us. Maybe we could post the links to some of the sites that you mentioned
Absolutely.
underneath. We'll let our community know. But thanks so much. I mean, practical advice is key, on this journey, and especially with keeping safety first and foremost. So thank you so much for sharing with our community some great advice.
Thank you.
So if you want to know more about these talks, of course, we have talks with experts, researchers, brain talks. We look at people diagnosed. We look from their perspective of what it's like to live with dementia. All of these talks are always highlighted in a newsletter you can sign up for on beingpatient.com. We also want to hear from you. So let us know what it is you want to hear about, who you want to hear about a topic. Feel free to suggest. That's why we're here. We want to bring experts to you so that you can engage with them directly. Thanks so much for watching. We look forward to next time, and thanks again to Grant.
Thank you.